16 persons said to be hunters were alive, unfortunately, were caught shot at Uromi in Edo State. A lot of concerns about that. The victims who said, of course, report has it that they were Hausa hunters, were traveling from Port Harcourt to Kano for the Eid celebration, where they were intercepted around 1:30 p.m. by a member of Edo State Security Corps and local vigilantes. They not only killed them, they of course killed the dogs they were with. Their den guns, the traditional use for hunting in the northern Nigeria, were also mistaken for a security threat. And joining us is a senior security expert and of course the public affairs analyst Jonathan Onoja. Thanks so much for joining us, even with that very quick notice. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's my pleasure.
Yes, it's that situation right there. Hunters moving from Rivers State. Probably you may say they boarded the vehicle from Port Harcourt, travel about 4 or 5 hours passing through Edo State. But unfortunately, they were said to be, they said kidnappers. They have given a lot of illustration. What is your general view about that mob situation? Do you feel that this was about intelligence report? Because those that are coming out to say that community or that area have been prone to a lot of attacks, and probably this may instigated the vigilante to take an action. What happens to jungle justice? How can this situation be managed if people's life, about 16 of them were lost just like that?
It's a sad situation, and first, we just pray and hope that the families of these victims or the victims of this mayhem found a peaceful place in abode. First and foremost, there should be orderliness in the place, and it also undermines our national security, the intelligence in place. Fortunately, the situation is pitiable. The deed has been done, but going forward, I think I need to advise our local vigilantes, because there's always, even in the Nigerian army, there's always a role of engagement. These contacts were not caught perhaps in the night, perpetrating any kind of evil. If they're found in the forest, there should be a way of apprehension, there should be appropriate quarters for reports, and there should be investigation. I think it should be the outcome of this investigation that perhaps we expect the Nigerian police, who are saddled with the responsibilities of policing day-to-day lives and all of that, to have, furnished the local government, the vigilantes, even including the chiefs, the traditional rulers, the report, the intelligence report, their investigation, the outcomes of their investigations. No matter what has happened in the past, does not warrant the killings of these 16 persons. No matter the situations, no matter how tense the area is, it calls for more intensified intelligence and adequate and appropriate intelligence. When people who do not, and that's why the former Inspector General of Police came and said he disbanded the formations of all the vigilantes. I think it's from actions like this, because they take actions without the rational considerations of how things are to be. And because of the lack of trainings that they also have, is the reason why the police Inspector General over the times have said the formations of all vigilantes should be disbanded. And I also wish that our police presence were there, because I know if they were there, what happened wouldn't have happened. We've seen where even broad daylight criminals are arrested, and either they are caught in the act, they are brought before the police, and police in a way we're able to rescue them for more investigation. Not because the police enjoys, settling with these criminals, but they believe that no one is saddled with the responsibility of taking lives. And that's why they say, first and foremost, they have the right to protect the lives or properties of everybody, including those that are also caught in the act. They also have the right to protect their right first. So I think if the police were there, so we can also blame it on the lack of the absence of the police presence in the scene that's also led to the killings of these 16 persons. So it's quite unfortunate, but it tells on our national security. It tells the unlawlessness that is in place now, and the way forward should be appropriate quarters should be called to actions. Appropriate quarters should also be, be trained. If there's going to be a need for the vigilantes, of course we need them, because they are the ones that are within the local communities. They are with the grassroots. They know much of their communities and all of that. But they must go through certain trainings to be able to act in tandem with our laws and also with the conventional rules of engagement. I think that's the only way to solve these problems.
I mean, it's really concerning because there are a lot of persons reading ethnic, issues to all of this. Some persons are dragging issues of religion into all of this. I think that was what prompted the governor of Edo State, Monday Pobelo, to pay the condolence visits to the Kano State government, where some of those victims happens to come from. But away from that, issues of hunters traveling, because these are things that we must discuss to address situations like this to happen again. If they had moved from Port Harcourt, at no point did they meet with a checkpoint where good security, like the police or the Nigerian army, were able to be, probably confront with them and probably have some of these checks? Because if you say local guns and some of the things that they carried were a threat to, the peace of the state. These are the things that probably the security agencies from Port Harcourt, River State, wherever part of the Port Harcourt, River State they came from, would have comprehended.
You see, Mr. Mike, we need to balance this discussion. We first blame the act, we've condemned the act. Now, we need to put this thing into perspectives, and also look at the negligence on the part of our security intelligence. People, like you rightly pointed out, moved from point A to point B. And there was no apprehension. Nobody was caught. There was not even intelligence to, there are going to be, I will saw some persons in these numbers having, because 16 is not just, it's a number. 16 is enough to do anything in this country. So if people of that numbers move from one point to another, and there's no intelligence report about their presence, their movement, then it tells how sad our security intelligence is belittling, is nothing to write home about. Now, again, the Hunters Association, because they could also be terrorists, they could also be called killer salesmen. But then we are looking at from the other perspective, they are hunters. As the Hunters Association of Nigeria come out to say they are the members, that's a point to look at. Because every hunters, regardless of whatever they are, ought to be registered and be known to be hunters. Now, it also, some quarters have raised concerns that at what point do we begin to see the Fulani Head House, Northern Brothers now engage in hunting, and traveling that distance in the bush? It's something also very suspicious, considering the very terrain that they are and how tense that terrain has been. So you also need to see that they have a blame, and we must look at it from that perspective. Because if you and I carry arms and parade ourselves in the Federal Capital Territory today, and unfortunately we are being caught, we will not have to give excuse that we are hunters. That's not the way to be. And before now, you recall that the former president, His Excellency former President Buhari, looked at issues critically and said, shoot on sight any individuals, headers, or whatever that bears arms, because it is not legalized for them to begin to carry arms about. So if they were carrying arms, whether being Dane guns, whereas it undermines our security and also it's a threat to life, because these guns can kill. At what point are we now being legalized to bear arms and parade across the city centers in the name of hunters? Because I could have swear carry these arms, do any evil, and then tag it as hunters. So they also has to be profiled. If any individual want to engage in the business of hunting, such a person, we have the Hunters Association of Nigeria, which their bill has scaled, I think the second reading in the National Assembly, or I think even as past second or third reading in the National Senate. We also need them to profile these individuals, to come out with a report that said, these individuals are not our members. If they are tagged to be hunters, we have Hunters Association of Nigeria, which they ought to be registered with, because if it is a local hunting, then you can only do it within your terrain.
Because moving
of them gone from one position to another should require that you are licensed, you belong to an organization that is well recognized and known, and that you get your membership ID card. Were all those things part of material that we're seeing around them? So we should not emotionalize our issues of insecurity. Now the governors are moving from one point to another, right? And no governors in this country, even from the north and from the north, no governor from the north has paid visit to any eastern or southern part of the country that perhaps they said it is, even when we have had Mieti Allah come out openly and say they were behind social attacks. Nobody have come to pay this this condolence visit. But issues of, we have politicized our insecurity issues, and that's why we're not coming out of it easily. So the governor also should be able, you see, it was very easy for them to arrest, to identify, and also to arrest suspects. Now we've been having issues of insecurity across the state, and we've not been able to even arrest one single suspect, right? So if there's a will for us to handle those situations, it then means we can. Not because they are indigents of Edo State. No, it then means that we can. But the will is not there because of political issues. So we should not politicize our insecurity issues. If those issues are profiled and they have arrived at a point, yes, they are hunters, they are known, they have an association membership, they are licensed, they can move these arms from one point to another, then that point, you can now say, these peoples are hunters. While we condemn the act, it does not say the people are innocent of the act, right? We are only condemning these actions, this jungle justice. That is not to say that
taking laws into your hands.
Exactly. That's not to say that these guys are innocent yet. They're not innocent yet until proven otherwise. That's why I've laid the foundations for areas where they can be proven innocent. If not so, they remain they remain suspects that were actually unfortunate to meet the loopholes that day.
I mean, it's a very sad situation, and of course, even when both parties, like the governor of Kano State and Edo State, were in talks about the issues surrounding all of that. I mean, there are a lot of concern about some of the victims, who, of course, some families are raising questions about that. And that visit also, where Governor Yusuf was calling on the Edo State government to ensure that all suspects were prosecuted. He also urged federal government to identities of those arrested over the killings and demanded that the Edo State government compensate the families of the deceased. Would that resolve the situation? Because there were a lot of threat that some quarters of the north were saying we'll retaliate that action or the killing of some of our brothers within Edo State. So there were a lot of those threats coming in. How can this be put to rest?
You also, just days after this incident in Uromi, I don't know if you see the social media, I called some friends across around there, the burning of some buses, of a bus that contained some passengers allegedly to be, the Igbo brothers and all of that. If this thing continues, what we're going to have is a state of anarchy. Very ungoverned country. Because if it is happening today in Edo State, and some porters are saying compensators, people also will begin to make reference in the future why the issues of compensation has not been effectively managed by even the federal government. Are you me? We are talking about compensation today. Don't forget, there are a series of incidents that have happened in this country, counting from Lagos State, counting from even the Abuja-Kaduna train attack. And we talked about issues of compensations that even the federal government themselves cannot be able to fulfill their promise. I just cited these examples. There are so many other issues surrounding issues of compensation that the federal government has not been able to fulfill. What ordinarily should be done is the prosecution of those that are involved in this act. And nothing more. The act has been done. The deed has been done. We cannot go and redo what has been done by bringing them back to life. What I mean is that bringing these people back to life. Any other issues of compensation will warrant litigations and, of course, going to involve investigations. Because by law, when you say this person is a criminal, you need to prove it. If they are able to prove beyond reasonable doubt that they are criminals, and it was in that act they found them, and that were also lynched, then the issues falls back to, do you have the right to kill? It is that right that we are looking at. They should now go for prosecution of those individuals, the suspects that are involved in this act. But any issues of compensation should not come up yet. And if it has come up, then I feel that it is not to be honored. Because there are so many issues of killings across the North Central. And remember, if you have gone through, you have done your interview, your street interview in Uromi, in Edo State, generally, you've heard people. Even these people have been crying over the years. They have been crying. Like people have been dying there, they have been killing, there has been a series of attacks, and they suspected to be headers. And nothing has been done. Now, how do you now compensate the families of those that have been killed in attacks like this? How do you now compensate people that have paid for ransoms to release their loved ones? Do you know them? Do you know if they are the people? How do you now say they are innocent when what they are actually bearing is not legalized? So we should not bring emotions to these issues. The act has been done and it has been condemned. That we all condemn in totality, that it is not the right thing to do. But sometimes, like we have seen over the years, issues like this have been happening. But nobody will come up to say this is wrong. How can the whole community be under siege for 1, 2, 3, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and there's no intervention of the federal government? Must we wait till issues like this when they call suspected, when they call some perceived suspects, and then burn them to ashes before we now begin to rise to the occasion? Just yesterday, there were killings in some parts. Sorry for digression. There are killings in some part of Benue State in Otukpe local government in Asa too. Yeah, some individuals were killed, and about 2 other victims are now hospitalized, and other 2 kidnapped.
That will trigger the protest today.
Exactly. Now, must we wait for protests to happen? Now, in such a place, like in Asatu, then you now see some individuals bearing arms, and they tell you they are hunters, insisting in numbers, broad daylight. Do you look at them as hunters, bearing arms that is a threat to your life, bearing arms that is a threat to the community, bearing arms that is a threat to the state, to the state in the sense that threatening our national security? Individuals that are not wearing any police uniforms, not any kind of uniforms, they are not carrying any tag, just mercy, they are hunters, and you let them go with the burning in the state today, with the burning and the pains in the local government. So this is the issues.
But jungle justice is not the word.
But jungle justice, we are saying, is not the word. But we are saying that it is better we are being proactive by being reactive. The government is reactive in the sense that with what has been happening over there, if the government has taken over the state, taken over the local government by way of protecting the people as against this infiltration, things like this wouldn't have happened. Because the police who are saddled with the responsibilities of the protection of lives and property, with the daily policing of our people, if they were present in the place, if they are actually present, if there's a presence of security operatives and trained security, conventional security operatives in that place, of course you know that they would have arrested, they would have also paraded, and they would have also investigated. Even though they said the inspector of police have stopped the issues of parade of suspects, they would have investigated to know exactly where they are coming from, their intent, and how they are being. So this is a mercy, and this is a narrative in my perspective, just to corner this government, corner the state to a corner and make them look like they are now the suspect. Otherwise, they are the victims. They have been the victims over the years. So what has happened is a few of what has been happening in the years. But we are not saying jungle justice is the way out. The government should be should not be reactive. Right. They should be proactive to solve the people. If they have protected the people enough, they won't have be a call for self-defense in a way.
Jonathan Onoja, thanks so much for joining us, a senior security expert and public affairs analyst. Thanks so much for joining us on the show tonight and your beautiful insight as well. Hello, everyone. Taking laws into your hand or your hand may not be the way forward at all time. The security agencies should at all time also defend and protect lives and properties of everyone. And security is everyone always come together, give the necessary information we can before taking laws into our hands, because that may not is highly condemnable. And of course, we also join voices to ensure that all, suspects, prosecuted, and matters of these natures managed better, just to probably avoid future occurrences of this situation. This is where we draw the curtain and, of course, leave the conversation there. It's a development, a developing conversation. Of course, we'll continue to track that development. Also, there were a lot of protests in Benue, so we'll try as much as possible to get feedback from Benue. So what are the causes? What should the security chiefs begin to do to address all of these threats in our nation? Peacekeeping is paramount for us to have a national development. My name is Richard Micah. Thanks so much for joining us on the program Big Talk tonight. See you again.